It's been 3 years since the Taliban took over Kabul on August 15, 2021. The event changed the South Asian nation in many ways, with the most profound impact being experienced by the Afghan women. Their dreams of a brighter future have been crushed, with the regime systematically dismantling women's rights. Education, employment, and basic freedoms have all been stripped away, turning the country into one of the most repressive places in the world. The anniversary serves as a stark reminder of the devastating impact of the Taliban's rule on half of the nation's population. We have a report. Afghanistan, a nation once filled with aspirations, has been plunged into darkness under the Taliban's rule. Since their return to power, the country has witnessed a severe erosion of women's rights, making it one of the most repressive places for women and girls in the world. In the 3 years since the Taliban regained control, Afghan women and girls have seen their fundamental rights systematically dismantled. The regime's policies have stripped them of education, employment opportunities, freedom of movement, and political participation. Afghanistan has become the only country where girls are banned from continuing their education beyond the 6th grade, marking a tragic regression in women's rights. The Taliban's draconian measures extend far beyond education. Women are now restricted from many forms of employment, denied protection from gender-based violence, and face significant barriers to accessing healthcare. Even simple pleasures like playing sports or visiting parks have been taken away. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Afghanistan, Richard Bennett, has condemned this reality as an institutionalized system of discrimination, segregation, and exclusion of women and girls.
I think it would be accurate to say that ever since the Taliban took over power, these years have seen a steady but inexorable marginalization of women in all fields, whether it is education, whether it is employment. If you remember, initially restrictions were put on education in view of the law and order situation. But once women were kept out, they were not allowed to come in at all. And what has happened is, slowly but surely, they have been kept out of all institutions of education. As for employment, it is clear that, they have this particular system. No women may be allowed to be, can be allowed outside unless she has a chaperone. Now, initially they allowed women to work with NGOs, etc. Now even that right has been taken away. So when it comes to employment, also, what women have seen is their continuous and steady exclusion from any avenue of employment whatsoever, whether it is private or public.
The repression intensified in 2024 when the Taliban began detaining women and girls across Kabul and other provinces for what they termed bad hijab or failing to comply with the Taliban's strict dress code. Reports from the United Nations reveal that these detainees have been held incommunicado, subjected to physical violence, and faced severe threats and intimidation. In March this year, the Taliban's supreme leader, Hibatullah Akhundzada, reaffirmed the group's commitment to enforcing their version of Sharia law, including the reintroduction of public flogging and stoning for so-called moral offences. According to Afghan Witness, a group monitoring human rights in the country, the Taliban carried out 417 public floggings and executions last year alone. The Taliban's rule has thus significantly curtailed human rights, with women bearing the brunt of this oppression. In addition to intensified restrictions on women's and girls' rights, the Taliban have severely curtailed freedom of expression and the media and have detained and tortured protesters, critics, and journalists.
The fact is, the Taliban does not want a media which keeps on criticizing it and keeps preparing a ground for a situation that the Taliban can be overthrown. So to that extent, they want to control the narrative. So you cannot be over Taliban. At best, you may say certain policies are wrong, that some aspects of governance are wrong, or that food aid has not received a particular village, or we could do with more infrastructure. This is the kind of non-controversial criticism that the Taliban basically want to push. But if anybody wants to say that this system cannot work, it is doomed to failure, then the Taliban will not take it kindly. And unfortunately, I think unless a particular system of governance is able to allow criticism and let its policies corrected by constructive criticism, it will not be able to function. Right now, Taliban is having a free run because internationally there is no appetite to start another civil war in Afghanistan and try to change the Taliban.
The Taliban's harsh treatment of women has isolated Afghanistan on the world stage. Most countries refused to recognize the Taliban as the legitimate government, and the United Nations has made it clear that recognition is off the table as long as bans on female education and employment remain in place. The international community's condemnation has been steadfast, though the Taliban dismisses such criticism as an unwelcome foreign interference. As Afghanistan grapples with this authoritarian regime, the clash between the Taliban's oppressive rule and the global demand for human rights continues. The nation's future remains uncertain, caught in the tension between a brutal past and the hope for a more equitable future.